Brother, um, good to see you. Good to see you. It's been a long time. I don't know, it's one of those things where so much, at least on my side, has happened since I last saw you. I'm guessing that there's a lot of life experiences that you've been experiencing yourself just based on like the podcast. Just wanted to actually like give that Inner Work podcast a shout out. Check it out to everybody. But how you been?
That is it's
I
a
know it's a long,
complicated question.
yeah.
No, I mean, I want to say good, and that at the core is maybe closest to the truth. I've been good, but boy, it's been quite a journey the last couple of years. It's been very intense, very adventurous, very revealing, very beautiful, very challenging.
Yeah.
So it's been quite a ride as I glean from you as well that you've also been through quite a journey. But I do have to say that I do feel very blessed. My life is very, very beautiful.
Is there a correlation? Because like I just felt that. Like one of the things uh that I think I've developed like a deeper relationship with is like the the energy that we transmit that's all around. That's like it's so interesting because we're not brought up with this type of thinking in the Western world. Certainly our education system is a fucking disaster. I can just speak for what I experienced now. I became a stepfather recently. Um
Oh wow.
yeah, and so like seeing this 8-year-old child in school and what they're experiencing, I'm going, holy shit, like it's broken. But spirituality, one of the things that I think that we're just not being brought up with in our lives, and it's showing in our society, is that spiritual wisdom that I think had been certainly evident in so many traditions and cultures over the years. And so I don't know. I just sort of like felt that when you came on. I was like, Steli, I feel you. But is there a correlation between the fact that like you and I have been in this like startup space as an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, and I can just tell you from my experience and then just what I know of you, I can only speculate. But you moved from Europe to Silicon Valley and just to fucking conquer the world. And I felt the same way coming from like Florida, from Miami to Silicon Valley, do the thing, you know, and I just sort of hit a wall, you know. I hit a wall spiritually, um, from a lot of different perspectives. And my question to you is there do you think there's some sort of correlation between like individuals who have a similar experience like that, where they're going out to conquer their dreams and reach these incredible heights in the material world, right? In society, that just kind of like now are inspired to go in and seek something that is perhaps beyond the material dimension of reality.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but speaking for myself, I think that there is something to be said for this pattern of having a desire wherever that comes from, and then having to be faced with the fulfillment of that desire. I mean, both ends, not accomplishing what you desired and attempting and not accomplishing it, as well as accomplishing it, both seem like such opposite experiences, but they're really part of the same coin in that it resolves something that might lead you to ask more questions, that might not lead to the outcome that you thought it would. Um, I think that I had a burning desire, as a child, to self-actualize, to prove the world wrong, to prove myself that I'm worthy, to feel also powerful, because I grew up in circumstances that I felt, well, this sucks. The world is just pushing me and my family around, and I felt we were very powerless. So I didn't want that anymore, right? I wanted to grow up and be somebody that had control over his destiny. And that part of my journey was very fulfilling and challenging. And you can look at anything, I think, and see it through different lenses. And although I was chasing kind of a mental mastery of sorts and an external material mastery, it was driven by an internal, and with that kind of spiritual drive of seeing who I truly am and what I can truly be. But once you accomplish these things, or once I accomplished a certain amount of success, I think I felt that, all right, this was great, but this isn't it,
Yeah.
right? This is not it. And I had this very early when I was 19, got very lucky that I made a ton of money in a fairly young age. And I realized at 19 already that money is not going to be the answer. Like that it doesn't make me happy. But I thought that growth there was a story I was telling myself that, oh, it's about personal growth. That's what fulfills me. That is what excites me. But underlying that desire for growth was definitely an insecurity of I'm not worthy unless I'm accomplishing higher and higher external plateaus, and unless I have a certain amount of external validation and admiration that proves that I'm worth living, that I'm worth loving, that I'm worth, worthy. And if I never looked under that and went, well, that's an interesting, it's an interesting, proposition to live your life based on that sort of insecurity and that drive that if you don't accomplish more and more, you're wasting your life or you're not worthy of living. It's pretty harsh. But I think a lot of people, once they've accomplished material success, a bunch of them go, well, this is not fulfilling, so I guess I have to do more of it. And then other people go, shit, this isn't fulfilling. Maybe this is not the answer or not the only answer. And I think in that regard, that's not really what happened to me as directly, but this is a way of looking at my life. I think that I accomplished a lot of success in my business, but I was very unsuccessful in my marriage, in my family life. I was very unhappy about it. And I think that at some point when I started addressing sort of my relationship challenges, I realized how, as developed, as mature and wise I thought that I was in business, as immature, undeveloped I was in love and in relationship and in my family life. And discovering that big dissonance that, oh my God, I'm so bad at this and I never invested any of myself in this area of my life. That actually surprisingly put me on a spiritual path. So it was more the unhappiness in family than the business, because once I accomplished a success that made me go, all right, this isn't exciting anymore to me. This is not like driving me as much anymore. I was not as surprised about that fact, I have to say. I was like, all right, I kind of knew it, but now that I'm here, I really like it's confirmed. This is not going to be the driver for the rest of my life. This is not what I want to keep doing and keep chasing forever.
That all of that resonates deeply, and there were a couple things that you mentioned, like, and this is something that I've observed. You talk about your childhood and sort of the way you felt and the experiences you had early in life. Why do you think that childhood is such a huge a variable that has such a huge impact on the way that we end up operating now at, you know, 2 or 3 times
Yeah.
later, right? Decades later, I
Yeah.
should say.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of knowledge out there about how formidable and imprinting the childhood years are for a variety of psychological and biological reasons. I think one area that I've been pondering more about is that if you zoom out and you look at it more spiritually in one way or another, and not less just as a biological unit of this is a baby, this is a mother, father, and what they do, what the environment does is imprinting and coding things into the baby's brain, which is definitely true or probably true. I think there's another component of, you know, what I've noticed is that there's these patterns that we have and that have been given to us. But if we ask ourselves, well, they've been given to us, but who has given them to the people that have given them to us? The chain is
Mm.
ancient. Like the chain is very, very, very
Generational trauma, things like that.
generational, right? And
Yeah.
it's much larger than just, my dad died and my mom was, busy with work or something, or my mom wasn't as loving, or my father was absent-minded, or whatever. Like that's on a single unit true. And people, I've met a lot of people that started doing inner work later in life, and then sort of came out of it with the discovery of, wait a second, my parents screwed me up, and then had this sort of anger about their parents and their childhood, and we're holding a grudge. And I thought, well, your parents, where did they get that from? Like, they were they born this way? Did they choose this? No, my grandparents were the same way to them. Okay, so it wasn't completely at the choice of your parents
Mm.
to be this way. And who did it with your grandparents? Well, fucking knows, probably their parents. So we're talking about things that for hundreds of years, thousands of years, maybe we were handed, from one generation to the next. And if you think about it that way, it's very powerful. It's like a sort of an ebb or flow of
Mm.
history that is greater than the individuals in your life necessarily, just like your father or your mother or you're this or you're that. And then it becomes easier, at least for me, to be a bit kinder to myself and others and go,
Mm.
this shit is hard and this shit is thousands of years old. And if my and I think at the core, I know I'm trying my best and I fail all the time. And I know my parents tried their best, obviously, and
Yeah.
they failed. But I think when I was younger, I had one shock of the system, which was my father dying when I was 6. And that collapsed a lot of things in my worldview. Like it collapsed the idea that the people I love, that I'm safe, that the people I love are safe. Nobody's safe
Mm.
anymore afterwards. I'm like, people are dying, right?
Yeah.
Everybody I love can be gone. I think that was very destabilizing to me. I think seeing how my mother dealt with the grief, how my family dealt with the grief was very destabilizing. There was sort of a harshness to it that was, okay, we have to be strong, and so we're gonna just show up every day, do the work, and not talk about the pain that we're feeling,
Mm.
because there was a fear in my family that if we show that we're crying and that we're in pain to the children, we're gonna hurt the children, so we're just gonna put on a brave face. But that created a very kind of hard environment, very like, okay, I can't, if nobody's showing their pain, I'm not going to show my pain either, right? It's not safe to do so. It's not good to do so. And a couple of other things happened. I was, I was put in first, like I entered school weeks after my father died. Not ideal by any stretch of the
Yeah.
imagination. And then as life wanted it to be, my first school teacher was not, was not a gentle lady. She was a woman that was very angry, was lashing out, screaming at me, hit me a couple of times. So it was not a perfect experience for me to have. So a lot of these things came together at a formidable age at 6. And I remember my childhood literally like in a movie where up until 6, everything was in colors. And from 6 till 16, everything was black and white. Like it's literally, my life felt very black and white, very empty, very harsh. And I was just trying to survive
Yeah.
that period of my life. And so that's kind of my individual experiences and many, many others that have led to some of my strengths and the beauty of my life, but also some of the challenges that I have. But I also think about everything that is a burden, everything that is holding me back or hurting me, or any trauma that I carry in myself. When I step back, I see that it's not individual. This is a part of a species that's generational, not just 2, 3 generations, hundreds of generations back. And so when I try to remember when I work on these things for myself, or when I work on these things with the people I love, you have to have a lot of grace, which is something I don't have much of, and I'm working on expanding. That these things are, change is possible and it's beautiful, but you also have to give people credit. It's not easy, and it's not that people were born and just choose to do these things. They carry a long legacy oftentimes.
Yeah. Again, so many things. I'm just sort of sitting back and going, holy shit, the commonalities that we have in our experiences. You and your father. I had an experience with one of my parents was in a mental hospital, um, and I had to experience that at a young age as well. And all the inner work that I've been doing, and frankly, I've been doing work for I'm 41 now, right? So for what 30 years or something, right? And I will say this, and I don't know if this resonates with you, but like I felt from, I don't know, 11 teenage years, et cetera, all the way into college. And college wasn't easy for me. I didn't go the traditional route, like, that I think a lot of people, at least stereotypically, go through. But for me, like when I got the entrepreneur bug in college, that was the thing that started to hit the dopamine and make me feel better and make me feel alive, right? And it
Yeah.
was like, oh, that's the thing. Wow, I don't feel depressed because in retrospect, I was depressed for a long time, dealing with anxiety. And you talked about fear and safety. Safety was a big thing there. So I totally get it. And and it's just interesting how, again, these experiences will impact us. And in a weird way, they also motivate us because I speak for myself, the discomfort of not feeling amazing and the drive to want to reach something that ends up making you feel good. Now, look, there are a lot of people who will use external substances and things like that, which, I've smoked my share of weed and drank and stuff like that over the years. I can say that now at this point in my life that stuff doesn't work. And the other interesting thing, and I'd love to get your feedback on this, is like the dopamine hits from the pursuit of material world success stop working the last couple of years. And look, I can only speculate, but I know your business flows, and I know how successful that business has been just from the externally. you know i I can say that I didn't achieve the level of success, even though I know individuals who have made hundreds of millions of bucks and they still want more, right? To your earlier point, oh, I need to continue to go. But like that I just don't. I know that the pursuit alone of material success is not going to be it, because it's always more. And just given that I've had this experience where I've seen a lot of people make enormous amounts of money and still not be there, right, in terms of like happiness, I think that also impacts my worldview on that. So like I can definitely understand. What would you say is like, do you have any thoughts around that, experiences around that particular kind of like notion, and specifically that dopamine hit from the success stuff doesn't work anymore? And then what now? What the fuck do I do now, right?
Yeah. So I do believe um, that pursuing something to accumulate more of it is a game that is in most cases, I'm sure there's exceptions to this, but in most cases, it's fairly empty, right? Could I imagine that there are people whose deep heart art is playing magical, number math tricks to make the numbers go up, and it's just their delight to do that. Maybe I've met some people, very few people out of the many hyper rich billionaires that I've met. There's been one person maybe that I felt like this person is truly living their art. This is just what's in their heart, and it's not about more material. They just love to play, and part of the accident of what they were good at is that a lot of money accumulated, but they seem very detached from that. Most other people that I've met that have been very wealthy seem completely devoid of any meaning of that number keep rising or how big the number has been. It's very disconnected. Actually, we did an experiment last year, or at the beginning of this year, where one of my co-founders and I had a bunch of catch-up calls with people that had started with us during the Y Combinator incubator time. So people that had started their startup during the exact same time as we 10 years ago, right? And we talked to some people that have been very successful. And the most shocking thing, maybe not surprising, but still kind of shocking, because I knew these people so intimately when they started, just the first 3 months of them starting their company and us starting their company, we spent every week together and we saw each other. And the most shocking thing was how terribly aged they all looked and how unhappy they all looked, especially some of them that had just recently sold their companies for hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And their comments, the first comments in a lot of these calls were like, "Holy shit, why haven't you guys aged at all?" Like I was, we were looking at these people like, "Wow, they look like they're 70. Like what
Yeah.
happened to them?" And they're looking at us and going, "Why are you so young? Like what is wrong with you guys?" So, and I know a lot of these cases, it's sort of like plastic surgery. I think, you know, seeing somebody, like having someone say, "Hey, I've changed something about my external appearance in my face and I'm now happier. And my goal is now going to be more and more plastic surgery because I feel like that's going to make me prettier and prettier and prettier." I think we all know where that ends. It ends in a quite a monstrous looking end result at the end for most external people that are
Yeah.
not involved with this person.
Botox everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere, everything just looks, not okay anymore. Like it's just everything in access is sort of, it's not healthy. And the same thing is probably true for chasing financial success. There's an access that comes with it that at some point mutates you and
Mm.
imprisons you. Um, but I also will say, honestly, like I a lot of people that move from sort of a financial world to then eventually having a desire to move away from that world and move more into a spiritual world or a world that's more, focused on the spirit. A lot of the times, honestly, I see people just switching one ambition with another. And so instead of chasing a Ferrari, they're now trying to become the best meditator, or they're now trying to be holier than everybody else,
Yeah.
right? And be like the Jesus or the Buddha person. And I've come to realize that spirituality, it really can't be measured in external ways. Like what somebody does externally, how they look, how they talk, may or may not relate at all to what their inner world looks like and what their inner experience is like. And so I find that somebody can, clean the basement and it's a much holier, more spiritual exercise than somebody meditating in a temple for a month in silence. It can't be seen with the eyes or just observed. Oh, and I see too often people that go into spirituality that take it as a thing that now makes them better than these other people. And I'm
Mm.
like, that doesn't seem spiritual at all to me. Like making yet another thing that makes your ego, that gives you an ego boost and makes you a better than other people. Oh, I was not as advanced on my spiritual journey. When I hear these things, to me, it sounds like, oh, we bought our third Ferrari and we're happier than the Joneses next door. Like it's like it doesn't make my soul smile. It doesn't make me feel like, okay, here's somebody that is living more of their truth, whatever that may be. So I've also shied away from demonizing money or fame or wealth. These are things that I think are accesses that show that these are empty pursuits that a lot of us chase to find happiness because we can't find it internally. But I don't think sitting there in a lotus pose and saying I'm now a spiritual person necessarily means that there's inner beauty and truth either.
Yeah.
So the challenge is to face one's truth, which is an ever-changing, very elusive shadow, and that needs sort of the courage to look at a lot of things, at least for me, that at first sight look scary or very ugly. Like a lot of what I've come to learn about myself at first over the last couple of years of going more into a spiritual inner practice were things that I thought were very ugly, weak, that I despised, growing up, that I judged. That's why I didn't want to see them inside of me. That's
Mm,
why I cast them away inside of me. And you know, looking at these things that I thought of weaknesses, and I thought they are my enemies. I need to self-actualize by destroying all my inner weaknesses, all my pettiness, all my insecurities. All that has to be destroyed, and I'll be a superhuman, right? I'll hack my way to greater stellydom or whatever. And I've come to realize these are not my enemies. These are my children that need to be raised. Like these are
yeah.
the parts of me that I need to love. And that's difficult work, can be accomplished probably in many different ways, but chasing more of anything will not really ever probably be the answer to that.
There's a resounding concept that as I've been doing work in meditation, breath work, I mean, you name it, like the last couple of years, it's I sort of, I don't know, I guess one would call it a slow like awakening or awareness of certain things, which can be, scary and empowering in some ways. I guess the way you would look at it is the way you feel about it. I think it's very subjective, I suppose. But one resounding concept, I think, for me, and also after diving into a lot of like traditions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, even though I was born and raised Christian, I sort of very much now look at it differently. And I was born and raised into that tradition based on my culture, right? The Spanish culture being having that as an underpinning. Um, but the concept is acceptance, like just profound acceptance of what is, and I think that it's very difficult, right? At least for me, to
Yeah.
consistently accept. But I think like ultimately, I don't know that I don't know that I've come across the an individual, even like the Buddha, and other spiritual masters or deities or whatever you want to call it, that said, oh, here's the answer, right? It was almost like this notion that they sat back and said, oh, I'm just going to accept it's acceptance. This is what it is. And maybe, I mean, I think there may be concepts like, we are spirit, where this quantum, energy, that lives in a material body for a bit. And then, we continue on. I mean, it's a much deeper conversation, but maybe those sort of things make it a little easier to accept our mortality, right? Like this thing that we have this limited time, or maybe not, right? Depending on how you define it. But that's been, I think, that acceptance of what is, I think is something that I keep running into. Um, I know we don't have a lot of more time. I want to be respectful of your schedule. I feel like we could sit here and talk for hours. I had a list of shit that I wanted to
Probably.
ask you, and I was like, "There's no way." I knew I was only gonna get through maybe one. Um, you had let's talk a little bit about your podcast, where people could find it, and what inspired you to launch it.
Yeah. So the podcast is called Inner Work with Steli Efti. I think that, I had done a tremendous amount of um, teaching in my business, creating a lot of videos, giving a lot of talks. I had a podcast with a amazing person for many years, teaching about
Heaton,
entrepreneurship and
yeah,
startups, Heaton Shah.
yeah.
So I'd taught and talked a tremendous amount about business and sales and entrepreneurship and all that. And I realized that I had said everything I had to say, and I was now doing it because I was doing it because I was good at it. But there was no inspiration. It was not art anymore. It was
Mm.
not fun. It was just a chore, to do, something I needed to get over with. And I was craving and missing a creative outlet where I can play, where I can talk about things I'm actually more passionate, more interested in. And so my best friend Ramin and I started thinking, well, we don't want to do video stuff. We don't want to write too much right now, but maybe we do a podcast where where we just talk about what I'm most interested in. And what I was most interested in was the inner work, was the work that I was doing in my inner world, not on the outer world. And one of our first and most difficult mission statement for that podcast was that this should not become another to-do item. Like, this should not become another work. This should be play. It's just two friends with their instruments jamming, improvising, playing, not sort of a career, not a goal to write a hit and sell records and do this and do that. And it took a while of, playing with it and on and off, getting lost in different alleyways until we actually really got into a groove. Also, probably alongside me going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole and working and find sort of a path of inner work that most interests me. And so the initial desire was, I want to find something work related, or I want to find something I want to teach and learn and play with that I love and that I'm interested in. And none of the outlets that I have, although they all have audiences, right? Like, I have, hundreds of thousands of people that I can speak to here. That doesn't matter as much anymore. Like, I just want to talk about the stuff I'm interested in. And if nobody listens to it for now, that's fine. Let's just play. Let's make mistakes. Let's look like fools. Let's and with the Inner Work podcast, step by step, even before I realized it, I started opening up and sharing things about myself that became ever increasingly private. And it became more and more free from my sort of image of who I wanted to portray the world. And I was like more free to just be who I was. And looking back, the stuff that's on that podcast, if you had told me a couple of years ago that I would have that recorded and published for anybody to listen to, I would have been like, no way. There's no way I will ever want, because I always felt like a very private person, but which I still am, I guess. But it's been so much fun, so fulfilling. It's been to me, a piece of art. Like, nobody has to agree to that, but for me, it's just when I think about that podcast and what we've done with it, although there's no metrics, no accomplishments, no big growth, no fame, no money, it's been very, very, very deeply fulfilling to have that as a form factor to learn and grow and stumble and play. So it's been a beautiful gift. But it started all with saying, I've said everything I had to say in this world, and I could now chase bigger and bigger numbers, but that doesn't fill me up. It doesn't make me happy. Let's try something else.
What, and I know we got about 5 minutes left, but what is happiness?
I don't know. I do not know. There are moments in time where there's a state that I have that I might call happiness in that moment. But I think that, I think that the happiness that I crave is maybe more accurately described as, as, full presence, as peacefulness, as gratitude, love. Like, those are there are moments where it's something is flooding me. It is something that comes from outside this world that I get to experience. And I'm like, oh my God. And it's so deeply rooted. Happiness sometimes can be like a cheap little trick. And I like it, I'll giggle, and it's funny, but it is from this world. It is out of my mind. It is in my body. It is, stimulated inside of me, and it's fun, but it's not lasting, and it doesn't feel like a truth that is beyond my existence or my mere perception. So I like to be happy, but I'm not as focused on it. And I think there's many other states that we might call happiness that are maybe more deeply rooted than, other states that we call happiness as well.
Yeah, we could go down that quite a bit. Just like, how much is it? Like, how much of defining historically happiness really was ego getting stimulated, right? Oh, I
Yeah.
made $1 million. Oh, or feel good, but That's so fleeting. Just like the Buddha says, like and so many, right? So many spiritual masters and deities, philosophies have talked about like my Swami. I have a Swami that I work with consistently now of the is within the more of the Hindu tradition always tells me, he says, George, both joy and sorrow are both fleeting, right? And
Yeah.
because I'll come to him and say, man, I really want to feel inspired again. I really want to feel joy, and happiness. He says, it's only temporary, right? Either extreme. So what now, right? But Steli, I love you, man. I've always told you this, and from the moment I met you that day at that event, and I had followed you on social media and all your work within the sales tech space that you help create, right? Like it's all a big thing now, right? I've always felt this connection to you, even though we've only seen each other in person a handful of times. Just sending my love to you, um, and would love to continue to keep in touch. I know we could talk about a million different things here today, and I felt like, you know, perhaps the things we needed to talk about today surfaced. And yeah, just excited to be your friend.
My man, so I love you right back, and I'm grateful for your love. I felt it from the very first time we met. And I came to recognize and realize very late in life that love is not from this world, and it's definitely not from the mind, and it happens instantaneously. Oftentimes we have to work to agree to the love or accept it, but it is there, and it's definitely a shared experience, and it's been beautiful to be your friend, as you said, independently from the time that we spent in person together. So there's definitely a deep connection. I was excited when you reached out and said, "Hey, let's talk about something else than the stuff we used to talk about." And funny
Yeah.
enough, we're in a very similar phase in life. So, and it's beautiful to see you today. Like I've seen you many times in videos and social media and Zoom calls. And today, the very first moment that I saw you, I thought, oh, there's a lot that has happened, and this is maybe the most calm and peaceful that I've perceived you since I've known you. So that's a beautiful thing to witness.
Well, thank you very much. Um, well, have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll get Steli on to talk more about life, spirituality, and inner work in the future.